The greatest thing from Quebec since Celine Dion and GSP.
A pair of siblings.
A couple of stellar young men.
Two brothers.
These two young men.
Two siblings.
The hard-hitting pair represent Canada.
Welcome to Thinking Bros. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. And today we're going to be talking about what you can't expect when you're expecting by L.A. Paul. L.A. being the city of angels. You see, I'm already making the links right now.
The only thing he knows about geography.
And the geography, is that a geography knowledge?
For you, I think it is.
Right,
it's like
the
any information about any location.
A quote associated to a city in a country. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then you say it's geography and then it doesn't matter if you don't know it.
I like it. Anyway, in the second segment, we're going to be talking about the much promised peak. The continuation of Peak, the last, I guess 5 chapters. I'm guessing you didn't read chapter 9, but Peak from Anders Ericsson about how to make expertise. But we're going to start with the philosophy paper, what you can't expect when you're expecting. So it's a fun twist on a modern classic, as some would say. So do you want to summarize it?
Sure thing. Just broadly, the conclusion of the paper. And there's some steps to it, but it's not complicated at all. The conclusion of the paper is that whether you make the choice to have a child or not to have a child, that choice is not rational.
Well, no. If it's based on your projection of what having a child is like, it's not rational.
It's not rational. And then if you don't take into account your phenomenology and you don't take into account how you think you're going to feel when you have the child, then it's counter to the intuitive model that we use for decision making. So I guess it's just saying that the decision of having a child or not having a child generally is not rational.
Yeah, well, my first reaction to this paper was, who hurt you? When I was reading, did you get the same reaction?
I didn't get the same reaction. What do you mean, why does she care so much about this specifically?
Yeah, I guess. I think I just felt a lot of frustration because, look, when you're arguing for such a point, right? So, either you're basing yourself off of the classical model of deciding to have a child by projecting what it would be like to have a child, or I guess you're deviating from it, which, no real alternative is very rational. So she's just saying, whether you choose to have it or not to have it, it's irrational. Now, am I proposing a solution? No. Right? When you identify like a problem like this, the problem with not giving us a solution or an alternative, a way of thinking, I think the problem is here, people don't even consider this objection, right? Like often with philosophy, right? We're not even aware that this would be a likely objection.
Okay.
Just as normal people, because it is directed to normal people, right? It's not necessarily like exclusively philosophers trying to have children. Like, this is a problem. If she has identified what she has identified, this is a problem for everyone. So why would you advance this problem but not give a solution to it if you yourself haven't come up with a solution and you've spent all this time thinking about it and you have a clear mental representation of what's going on and you haven't been able to come up with a solution? Why would the parents whom you have just potential parents whom you have just informed that their way of deciding to have children or not is irrational, why would they come up with a better solution or alternative? Like, you can't identify such a problem and not give a solution. I'm just saying.
You can, if you don't see an obvious solution. If you've identified a problem, you just bring it to light and you say, hey, look, this is like a weird quirk that people aren't talking about and that I think we should talk about. And it's not like I'm not specifically by the text, but I'm inclined to agree with her conclusion, and I don't really care. I'm not like, oh my god, we need a solution, guys. My choice is going to be irrational. It's just like, okay, it's going to be irrational.
No, fair enough. Maybe at that point, everyone's still going to do what they do before. And in that sense, like, is
Yeah, but
just a
I feel like-
inconsequential paper.
Yeah, I feel like you're like initially against the paper, so you're already saying like, why would you bring up a problem if you don't have a solution? I mean, I'm sure many people bring up problems they don't have solutions for.
No, I'm just sure. I'm just saying, like when we read last week, the situation is hopeless but not serious.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy spent 95% of the book identifying a problem or the way to create your own problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the end, there's one chapter that elegantly gives a solution to it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's giving a solution to unhappiness. She's just giving, all she needs to do is give a rational alternative, even a tentative one, right? To how to decide to have children. I just feel like it could have been infused with more effort in that sense. But I understand that she doesn't, like, there's no obligation there.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that for everyone to care about this paper, for people like you who would read it, be like, okay, the rational argument's fine. Guess I'm having a child irrationally now.
Mm.
Like, that's not what you want from the world. If indeed your goal as a philosopher is to enrich the world with knowledge and making them figure out problems that they're not aware of, why wouldn't you always also give them an alternative to this?
Oh, what if you don't see an alternative and you don't see a
mention
solution?
it. I don't know. Mention it. She just leaves us with it.
Yeah, but maybe that's what the conclusion is, and that's it. Why does there need to be a solution?
Oh, because the way she frames it is, we need to rethink the normal way of thinking. That's one of the things she says.
Yeah, the one passage objects to parents, let's say, that don't have children, and then hear some parent complain about having about their children, being like, "Oh my God, it's so tiring" or whatever, and then the parents that didn't have children are like, "Oh, you see, I knew it. If I had children, I would be miserable," and blah blah blah. And that's what the objection is too, and that makes sense to me. And I don't see why. What more is there to add about that? Like, it's just a problem that people speak like this if the decision is indeed irrational. Like, you can't say that if the decision is irrational. If you can't project.
Well, I thought it was about deciding to have children or not.
Well, she doesn't make any suggestions about, like, she specifically says, I'm not saying you should have children or you shouldn't have children.
Sure.
She doesn't take sides.
Well, definitely, because that would depend. Some people would be, indeed lucky parents and unlucky parents and blah blah blah. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
if
how
we
about,
start
how
at
about
the
we
top, yeah.
summarize? Yeah. Do you have a good summary?
I can start. I think one of the first building blocks is the normal model of decision making. There's this perfect model where, ideally, in an ideal world, where you know all the values of the possible choices ahead and the probability that the outcomes from those events actually occur, you can multiply the probability by the value associated with each choice and calculate the expected value. And then the greatest expected value is the one you choose.
Nerd alert.
But then the normative model, which is what we use in our day-to-day, is just approximations across the board. And I mean, this sounds right? If I'm about to choose between taking a walk or reading a text for my class, I say, okay, taking a walk will bring me joy here, and then the downside is going to be that I'm going to be late for my schoolwork. And then if I do my schoolwork, it's going to be a bit boring, but I'm going to be ahead, and later I can do better things. And then I calculate which one brings the more value in whatever way I want, right? Like in a utilitarian way or in a practical way, whatever. And we multiply by the probabilities, and then that's how you decide. You decide by anticipating how you're going to feel, anticipating what the effects are going to be on you of that choice, and then you make a choice.
Yeah. Next up, I guess we have Mary the Color Scientist, which essentially is a thought experiment of Mary growing up in a black and white room and being taught everything about science and the science of color. And she's read every textbook possible. She knows everything about the physics of color. But then, one day, she's released from the black and white room, and she sees the color red for the first time. And the argument is she has learned something new. Okay, and that should tell us about knowledge of what it's like. So knowledge of what it's like can essentially only be experienced by going through the experience and not, hearing testimonies. I mean, if you're already seeing the parallel with parenting, here the science textbooks would be the testimonial of other parents and what you read about parenting online. And essentially the argument is everything that you could possibly learn with short of being a parent, well, I guess birthing a child and whatnot, and then growing it.
raising it
In
a petri dish, growing it
in a petri dish. Short of that, you can't. Well, anyway, testimony won't give you the necessary knowledge. Okay.
Yeah, and the term that refers to that is an epistemically transformative experience. So Mary in her room learned about all the wavelengths and what cones they would hit if she were to see red and which wavelengths and everything. She knows everything, but she hasn't had the experience, and so her experience of seeing red is epistemically transformative because she knows, basically she learned something. She didn't know something before, and now she knows something new.
Yeah, that feels right, but again, it feels like one of those philosophical shenanigans where you've created such an isolated, cherry-picked case.
Yeah. The problem is transferring that to having a child.
Of course it is, and that's what I was thinking the whole time, where is there really... You know how people often joke, I don't know, probably about their own achievement or something like that, that like, once you go through this, there's only a before and after that, right? Like, there's only a, like, before you see me, I don't know, what's juggle balls?
Yeah.
Once you see me juggle balls, there in your life, there will be a before that and an after that. Like, that's essentially how she presents having a child. Now, honestly, okay, well, between juggling balls and then marry the color scientist, having a child is somewhere in between. Okay, I know it's higher than in the spectrum of there's a before that and there's an after that.
Okay.
If you understand what I'm saying. But I did find it problematic to call it an epistemically transformative experience. Now, I have a quote that underlines each major component. And the problem for me is that the best argument for why it's epistemically transformative, and you can't make a prediction about your world after having a child, is the hormonal change. It really is. And that's the best. And then when you think about it, there is something that definitely rings true a lot for women, just because the things that go on in the body after birth. Okay, like, I understand that. But then that kind of goes through a predictable pattern, right? Postpartum depression is something that I guess a lot of women have, and that's because of a chain of like a specific chain of hormones. And then after that, once you get through that, shouldn't evolutionarily, if there's no dysfunction, shouldn't having a child be kind of very hormonally rewarding? I'm sure even the postpartum depression in some weird way is, how do you call it? Like, adaptive. I'm sure it's like, oh, you've just had a child, so you should, save your resources until wanting to have a next child, so we're going to, like, keep you down, like, nature's going to keep you down so you don't, like, abuse your body or something like that.
I'm not sure. You're making, like, very, like, exclusively biological claims about postpartum depression. I don't know that much about it, but
we're exclusively biologic. Oh.
Yeah, we're exclusively biological, but what goes on in our body is affected by how we think. I'm just saying that it's not just like, okay, postpartum depression is because once you give birth to a child, then the hormones start pumping and then this happens and whatever. There's also how you perceive your life after carrying a child, your cognitions that affect, your hormones, whatever it is, like whatever causes depression.
I just don't believe in such kind of cultural consistencies if it's not purely, well, at least in a major way biological. I don't believe that thought consistencies can happen at such a consistent level across cultures. For universal
religion?
phenomena across religions and culture.
No, but what about religion? Like it
Religion?
happens across. I don't know. Just there's some things that happen across the board. Like we're all human.
Yeah,
we all.
I guess religion is kind of anthropological, I guess, in the sense that we already spoke about how if you knew nothing about science and the creation of the universe, you need to attribute it to something, because not having an answer is worse than having a shaky one. But do you really think it's postpartum depression is a mental phenomenon if it happens with such consistency
But
across women?
that's not how it works. Like, do you really think depression is only a mental phenomenon? Like, yeah and no. It's many things.
Well, the thing about depression is that it just doesn't. You can't identify a specific group of people at a specific time in their lives that have it. You know what I'm saying? Like
Children of people with depression that have just lost something, probably lost a close one, have very high rates of depression.
Yeah, because losing a close one will always bring out something mental in you, and in that sense,
yeah, and like.
Okay, but I mean, look, we're not caught up on the postpartum depression literature, but what I'm saying is, still, her best argument for the before and after division of having a child is the hormonal one, isn't it? Because is there something else? Like a solid, concrete thing that could divide it?
That could divide it? Well, for me, I think, not being a woman, not going to carry a child, since I'm not going to carry a child, I still think that having a child will change me in concrete ways, and I'm not like committed to it being my own child and having my own child changing me. I guess it's more the case for women because they carry the child and they give birth and all the hormonal changes happen. But the hormonal changes happen in men too. But I think a lot of it has to do with the mental. Like I'm gonna have a different state of mind. Like once I create something,
New York state of mind.
Yeah, a New York state of mind.
I guess one could say, right? Yeah.
Like once I didn't carry the child, but I still, created it. I was 50% of the genetic material for the child, and then I supported the woman for 9 months. I will.
Okay. Say that to the judge, man.
And get some fudge.
Right.
And I don't know, just it being like me, basically. And me having to care for it and having to dedicate so much attention to it. And, I couldn't help myself but wanting to dedicate like most of my life to the child, at least until they're 18, Like
but
it
you
changes
know
you.
that. But you know that.
Yeah, but I don't know exactly how that's gonna play out.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, man. Like, it's gonna be the best thing in your life. Look, I have two big objections. Let's try to finish the summary. Now, here's a quote. Okay, experience with other people's children might teach you about what it is like to hold a baby, to change diapers, and hold a bottle, but not what it is like to create, carry, give birth, and raise a child of your very own. Now, she always uses the word. Okay, honestly, I wanted to break it down word by word. What she says, right? Create. Okay, yeah, people get a lot of practice with that. Now, in that part of the process, I don't see how. Okay, I'm okay. I guess maybe the process would be like what we see on TV with not being sure if you're fertile and then going get tested and knowing if you're you can actually have a child and all of that.
Discovering you're pregnant.
Yeah. Discovering you're pregnant, all the excitement there, but right, and I guess because it's such a big move, how in the unknown you would be about predicting your reaction to it, because you might think, oh, I'm so excited to have a child, and then you see those two lines and you're like, oh wow, okay, well, my life is going to change a lot. Now, and again, I think she does want to generalize this principle, and she says it too, to epistemically transformative experiences, and I don't see something that would be more hormonally transformative than this experience. But she wants to, argue for lesser points in that sense, in the sense that it wouldn't have the same hormonal changes for making big decisions. Like, there are other things in life that she would apply this for.
Okay. You're saying she extends her point about making like decisions being irrational to other things, but you're not ready to accept that. Well, you're not even ready to accept having a child, so you wouldn't be ready to accept the other thing.
But the only reason I mentioned that is because for her to include the word create, like, nothing has happened yet hormonally.
Probably starting
and
stages,
especially in men, right? Especially in men. So then that's why that's all I want to say. Like, the word create is included because even though nothing has really, really started in terms of hormonal changes, and I guess not even your worldview, but your way of processing information being different, right? That's epistemically transformative. That's essentially what it has to mean.
Yeah, you're very like insistent about hormonal changes.
Ovarian with it.
You're being very ovarian with it. No, you're being very insistent on hormonal changes.
Yeah.
I thought about it a lot. Yeah, she does mention it. It's weird. It feels like in the text, like after page 4 or whatever, could have been like 8 pages explaining why having a child is personally transformative and epistemically. Well, yeah, both. Yeah, epistemically and personally transformative. Like, just missing there.
Yeah.
And then, like, this hormonal thing that's stuck in there twice feels like it's just like, oh, look, like there's some concrete objectiveness to it, but I don't even feel like you must go there. I feel like epistemically it's transformative just mentally.
You can just stay there. I mean, look,
okay.
No, but I think isn't there a stat with Andrew Huberman mentioning it that men's testosterone drops 40% when they become a father?
I don't know. Yeah.
But see, that's very interesting, because if that's an average, you would have something very significant, 40%, in something that doesn't really have to be biological in any sense, right? In the sense that whatever deed happened, it happened 9 months ago. But the problem is, that's the problem with correlation versus causation, because what it would mean to have a child is, first of all, the mental phenomenon of, having founded a family, and how you can just kind of relax after that because your pursuit stage is over. So these men would probably stop working out because now they have to care for a child. Okay. And these men would probably, I don't know, they would sleep less, which lowers testosterone. They would blah, 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 and this. So, again, yeah, maybe you could apply the same things for postpartum depression, in the sense that you would tell me a few factors about women's behavior that would affect their hormones. But again, I have a pretty good mental representation of why it would happen in men. So I guess, yeah, I am helping your point in saying all of these things. Now, the next word is carry.
Yeah, which only applies for women.
Applies for women.
She does seem to argue more for it for women. Like she.
Yeah, I mean, there's the word her in places where it should be neutral, like everywhere. No, like,
yeah, but I mean, how can you make it neutral? It's either he or she, and she writes it, so she writes her.
Okay, but when I write it, I have to write she or him. But okay.
No, you can write he if you want to.
Okay.
No, I don't think that. Yeah, I think that's just like her thing. It's not like she's referring to women specifically. It's just,
I know it's a philosophical writing style, but I hate it.
Yeah.
Just say they, whatever. If we're gonna go for equality anyway. Okay.
I feel like to be honest, I haven't read your blog in a while, but
it's always they.
It's always they?
Yeah.
Okay.
School has taught me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I do believe in the imagery of like if women read my blog,
Right, you can
and
imagine yourself in
yeah,
in
if
that
they see a
place.
he 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 everywhere, my thought experiments aren't as convincing. Like it's not an argument about like gender equality and whatnot. It's just like unfair because you're excluding part of the population from experiencing any philosophical point you might make, and this is exactly what I felt here.
I see. I didn't intend to it as much, I guess. I think, like, I agree with her overall conclusions. Yes, I agree with her overall conclusions, but I think I get there in other ways, and I think there's places where she could have, like, emphasized. Because her argument for having a child being epistemically transformative is her saying, for most people, it's well, not specifically personally transformative. She just says, like, there's one sentence at some point, like, for most people it's personally transformative, and then that's it.
Yeah, and then I guess she just kind of dumps Mary the color scientist on you and then says what it's like knowledge is only experienced through experience. But then again, the reason Mary the color scientist is such a good thought experiment is because it takes it to the extreme. And how far along that spectrum this situation is really hasn't really been determined by her.
Yeah, my thing is, like, mentally, I think there's more to having analogous experiences with caring for another child, or what's the problem with? Does she mention adoption? I feel like there's one sentence somewhere about adoption, and I feel like it applies almost exactly, at least for sure for men, because hormonally it would be pretty much the same thing, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But adoption is like someone is under my responsibility. I'm raising this child. Your whole worldview changes. All your priorities shift, and I think that would be analogous. And then you take steps backward, and, like, okay, if adoption is pretty similar to having your own child, and then you go back a little bit, and it's like, caring for some child for a while, even though it's not yours for reason XYZ, and then
yeah, they're
go
on a
back
trip,
bit.
and it's like your cousin, so you just you have
Yeah.
it for a week, and I mean, it's another baby human being. You care about it a lot. Like, yeah, okay, it's not your life goal to raise it to be competent in the world, but yeah, and I like what you're saying because look, create goes out the window if the argument has to apply to adoption,
Right.
and it does because that's what she wants from it. Carry goes out the window. Give birth to goes out the window. Raise a child of your very own, and that's where the importance becomes there. Because, and I can't relate to this, right? When I in my work, I spend time with children. Like, I care a lot about them, but I do certain things. That's where the big difference is for me. I do certain things that I'm like, okay, if I allow them to do this right now, it will be okay today. But with time, if it was my own child, I wouldn't want them to create this habit. Like, if they want to, let's say it's chicken nuggets, and I'll let them eat them with their hands. Whereas if it was my child, I'd create the consistency of, no, you eat with a fork. Like, don't be
Chicken
weird.
nuggets, though. Like, the chicken nuggets are these little things.
Yeah.
With a fork?
Yeah, just because of the habit. Because, like, if it's chicken nuggets with hands, next time it's going to be broccoli, and then next time it's going to be something more oily, and then it's going to be dirty. Like, all I'm saying, like, I would have these considerations. Whereas, yeah, even if I kept the child for a week, obviously I'd keep it safe and all, because it's another human being. But if it was my child of my very own, it would be a little bit different. And that's where the biggest point remains, right? Because we've eliminated every other possibility. And raising a child of your own is where it becomes important.
Yeah, I think the thing is it's like it's so complex, and she acts like it's not complex. There are these many things that go into having your own child, and that's right, creating for women, carrying, giving birth, and then raising and everything. But it's complex, and yeah, I mean, you would have to argue for it being personally transformative. I agree that it is. I think it is personally transformative, but specifically having your own child, you would have to argue for why that is more transformative than adoption and raising a child.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, I'm not sure how much it disproves it, but some people, I mean, yeah, sure, they're monsters, but for some people, they don't care that much more when they have children, and that's quite obvious from the result of some children being what they are. And then on the other hand, some people care so much that even if they adopted someone at like 10 years old, they're gonna love them like it's their own child. And so it remains, we've shifted from the hormonal part to it being very, very psychological. Because for it to apply to men, it has to be 100% psychological.
Right. Well, you brought up that stat, and then you said there's a problem of correlation. Okay, yeah. It has to be 100% psychological, I guess, because men's body doesn't know apart from whatever the mind tells them that they're having a child.
Yeah, and then obviously when you're left with that, you have to argue for, okay, well, what specific mechanism makes it universally, epistemically, and personally transformative to have a child? And that's the big challenge that wasn't really addressed here.
The thing is, like, I think just a lot of things are epistemically transformative. It's like...
like eating. I see the world differently after I eat.
Yeah, I hadn't... Like, you have to argue for it being qualitatively different before and after. Like, if you eat pasta with tomato sauce and, meat and some cheese sprinkled on top, and then the next day you eat lasagna, and you've never eaten lasagna before, it's like, oh, eating that lasagna is epistemically transformative. Sure, yeah, it is, but what does it matter? Like, okay, I learned something new. I didn't know what lasagna was before, and now I know. I think the main thing goes to personally transformative. Like, the way you process the world before and after is not the same. And I agree that it is, but like epistemically transformative doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I think we despite infusing it with a lot of our own opinion, we've kind of summarized it well. But the main problem that I guess we haven't identified specifically that she brings up is that you can't take other people. Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of the quote that I said earlier, but you can't take other people's testimony and experience and just kind of use it to make a parallel of what you're going to experience and then come to a conclusion of the value that would have in your life. Like you can have a family that's, I don't know, you're very close friends and they're telling you everything. They're like, okay, it's really hard to get up in the morning at 4 a.m. every time because the baby's screaming and change the diaper, and then it's, I don't know, it does a mess in his bed and whatnot. And all of this, you compound it, and then come to your own conclusion. The argument is you can't come to your own conclusion about what having a child would be like based on other people's testimony, because the very way you're rationalizing and compounding it is one state of mind. You're doing it in one state of mind, but you're going to be in another state of mind after you have the child, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, but that she is arguing for.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay, yeah. I'm saying, like, her problem with making decisions in such a way is this. Okay, now, she even talks about stats, right? She does a comparison with lucky parents, who are people who decided to have a child because they thought that it would bring a good value to them, and it indeed did. Unlucky parents, who thought it would have a good value for them, had a child, and then it didn't. Unlucky non-parents and lucky parents, and you can deduce what... I said non-parents first, I think.
You said parents, and then you said non-parents. Whatever.
Oh, yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, non-parents. So, my problem with that is that she does bring up statistics, and it's not looking good for parents, but I have a thing for that too. But my problem with that is, if you abandon the kind of personal Western way of thinking that, oh, I am different, and just look at the results of how people end up feeling after having children, there is actually no need at all to take their testimony and then come to your own conclusion. Okay. Because if most parents are having, well, in the end, ultimately, after all is said and done, and after they're already crossed over to the other side of the epistemically transformative experience, whatever they say then can be kind of statistically compounded and give you an impression of where you're going to end up. You don't need to make your own calculations, is what I'm saying. Like, when she says, when you're making predictions about the value of having children, instead of taking their experience and then adding it up from your state of mind and then making a prediction about how you're going to feel based on, well, once you will have a child, why don't you already take those parents' conclusion about the overall value of having a child after?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, but there's like a, I don't know, a page or two where she talks about the research about how parents feel.
Yeah, once you do what I say, you're gonna look at the stats, and the stats are gonna be bleak, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So there's no need for the epistemically.
Oh yeah. By the way, there's like a page or two that talks about the studies that like a census of well-being in parents after they had a child versus non-parents, like adults that don't have children, and the results are mixed. Sometimes go one way, sometimes go the other, but basically you can't make a conclusion about which one is more happy. So you have to say that, I mean, pretty much well-being is equal in parents and non-parents.
Yeah. So but what I said kind of removes the need for considering the epistemically transformative, because you wouldn't be making a decision by, in a way, getting the 1 + 1 + 1, and in your world that equals 3, but in their world it equals 4 because it was epistemically transformative, right?
Okay.
You would get the 4 and then base yourself off of that. But then if you do get it, and actually the 4s will be more like -1s, right? That's what's going on here.
Well,
So-
I don't get that.
So, okay, if it's epistemically transformative, it's another mathematical system, essentially, right? You're getting the
You're
1 +
working in another, yeah. I think personally transformative, because epistemically transformative just means you learn something. There is something new. Personally transformative means you process the world in a different way.
Okay, well, yeah, personally. Okay, so in your world, 1 + 1 + 1 equals 3. So you're like, okay, I should have a child. But then it ends up in a new mathematical system, and 1 + 1 + 1 actually equals -1.
Sure. Okay.
They tell you about the -1. Okay, so already we can forget about the personally transformative part.
Forecasting how like you're gonna feel is not applicable.
Exactly. But what she says is that when you really look into it, sure, it might be mixed sometimes, but most of it ends up being a -1. So again, she ends up the paper with, I'm not going to tell you not to have children, but reconsider the way you're thinking about it. And my problem with that is my final objection. I know why it gets a -1 most of the time. Now, I didn't know L.A. Paul was a fan of me, but there's a thing specifically addressed to me in the text. Did you spot it? Okay, it's the following quote. You might think that none of this applies to you, for you are a sophisticated thinker. You know, or at least have educated, sophisticated beliefs about which psychological characteristics really matter when you become a parent. You, unlike the unwashed masses, can judge for yourself whether you are more or less likely to end up in lucky parents if you have a child. So that's cool. Thanks for listening, L.A. Paul. And I did indeed do. Now, the reason the average well-being of parents, I think one study I do remember is that parents whose children have left their home after they were 18, for example, have the, on average, same psychological well-being than non-parents.
That, like, I don't know, if that's supposed to prove, like, the effects of having a child, exactly. I think that's...
Yeah, because it's a done project, like...
No, but it's even worse, because my child has left, like, the value of your life from age 0 to 18 of your child is your child. You're like, okay, mainly it's like, this is what gives value to my life, and this is what makes me happy, and they left. So I think, well, parents struggle when their children leave. They have, I don't know, like, let's say 30 hours per week that they have to spend exclusively on working on their child, and then all the other hours that you do things for your child also, but it's not directly involved, and then poof, it's like an empty space.
I didn't even think about that. Right. You lose a certain purpose, and there's a vacuum of, I have to fill my time now, and it becomes like lame hobbies like bird watching. That's fair. No,
so yes. So looking at studies when the children have left, is like literally counterproductive.
I didn't even think about
Yeah.
that, but intuitively it bugged me. But then you said that, and it very, very much makes sense. But here's the kicker: the reason they all have bad experiences
You're so obnoxious, dude.
is because, and LA Paul, she's listening, so right, it's because they did a bad job. They raised bad children, and the proof of that is go outside right now, find the next 16-year-old or under, and you're gonna see that they absolutely suck. And I wrote here, go do the same studies about parents of children versus non-parents in the 1950s. I guarantee the satisfaction from having children and the pride they get from that they're going to have a higher well-being. I guarantee it. Because no one's doing a good job. Look at this society outside. That's the reason. I found it. Yes, LA Paul, I do have sophisticated beliefs. That's the reason.
I'm not gonna like make sociological claims with you, but
Okay, but like think about it, right? She's saying, okay, look, all I want to prove is that if you're projecting yourself, like how you're going to feel when you have a child, you're not making a decision about having a child rationally. And even if you don't agree with my kind of epistemic personal change thing, even if you're looking at the stats and you're empirical, look what's going to happen. Because one would think, evolutionarily, this of course makes sense, and she mentions it briefly, that having a child is good for you, right? In terms of, giving you a purpose and giving your life a reason, right? But I would argue it's not just having a child that's evolutionarily good for you. It's doing a good job and leaving something worthy in this universe. And again, I'm not saying it's their fault. Like even yesterday, we finished, the spring break camp thing, and half of my children were like, I just want to go back home and play video games. And that's the thing. That's the thing. Like in the 1950s, you would sit down and you would, make your child experience the A not B error and laugh at them, right? And he knows people. He knows people.
For the record, everything he says is his ideas, and everything I say.
He does not endorse. Alex
I do
does
not
not endorse anything I say. But you would go back home and actually play with a child and actually, read them words and make them learn things. No, but really. And now you make them watch TV. You have a button to click that takes a lot of responsibility off of your shoulders. Now, the parent feels emptier because they're not actually investing anything into the child. They're investing into an iPad. So yeah, that's a good $700. Then the child isn't really becoming anything great because there are studies that show that if you passively make a child watch TV, they're not going to learn the same amount of words than if you had, told them these words. And that's where shared attention comes in. And obviously all the mechanisms that make parents great at teaching their children, they're taken away by electronics. So the parents have a magic device that takes responsibility off their shoulders. The children suck because of it. And the parents have less purpose because they're not doing a good job. And two, they're in fact not getting the happiness from the children because they're not investing in the children. And as we know by Saint Augustine, happiness comes from investment and the expected loss. Like the expected loss gives you the dopamine from the gain. So there you go. Solved it for you.
Saint Augustine said that about the dopamine.
Yeah, he was, I don't know, he did studies of casinos and in any case, I think I solved it. The reason this is all so counterintuitive and the final conclusion that indeed, look, you agree with the personal shift argument. I don't like the conclusion, so I don't want to agree with it, but even if I were to agree with it, right? The problem that this paper leaves us with is that it's evolutionarily counterintuitive for it not to be a rational decision to project what it is like to have a child and then decide based on that to have a child. And then if you look at the stats, you would at least want it to be, okay, parents have a higher well-being, but they don't. Why? I just answered it.
Okay.
Like, for me, saying what I said makes it less counterintuitive to accept, like, to gobble down this paper.
Right, because like what you're saying could be true. I just don't want to make claims about the way things are because I really don't know. But
You haven't been in the jungle. I've rummaged. I've rummaged it. That's the truth.
yeah, my thing is, I think it's too black or white. I think you can look.
No. Okay.
I think you can look at the spectrum of. I mean, as I was saying earlier, from having your own child, which I do think overall will be more personally transformative than adoption, than whatever it is. But you can go back bit by bit to adoption, to caring for a child for a long time for some reason, to whatever. And all these things do entail a change of perspective and a change of what you value.
Yeah. You would be like, you'd sit down with Ellie Paul and say, okay, what about adoption? She would say, yeah, the same exact things apply. And you would say, okay, what about adoption of a child when they're 10, for example, right? Because, you're missing out on a large part of their, yeah. And then she would say, probably, yeah, right? And then, yeah, as you said, you go back.
Yeah, I just don't think it's that exclusive to having your own child, even, for adoption or other ways, and as I said, or for other things. Like, you go into a program in university that you're not sure you're gonna like, and learning things is epistemically transformative. You learn something, you learn something you didn't know before, but also it can be personally transformative. Things add up, and over time you become a different person, you have different interests, your priorities change, like going to university or even educating yourself, reading about something online, you can get really invested into something and you are really personally transformed. It may take more time with other things that are not having a child, but let's say you get interested in the environmental cause, right? And you do a lot of research. And now, like, most of your day is spent thinking about how you can save the planet and about the steps you can take, and you process everything that comes into your mind through this lens, and it could be in the same span of time, right? Like 9 months, you learn a lot about it, you get invested in charity groups, you get invested in groups at your school or whatever, and your world is changed, you're personally transformed, you process things in a different way, and you can't have rationally made the decision about doing that either, because before you were a different person. I just think, like, a lot of the choices we make are irrational, and that's okay. Like, I don't think I just don't think it's exclusive to having a child.
Yeah, it's a good point. Choosing a university, I guess the way you would come to those conclusions, let's say you have to choose between two, you would ask a friend who has gone there, a friend who has gone there,
right? And
you ask them about their everyday, and then you take that and you kind of compound it with your own worldview, and you would kind of determine a value of what it would be like for you to go to that university. The argument here is that would be rational,
right? And I don't think that's such a far reach. Like,
no, it's fine.
I think a lot of the things with parenting is like some things are unexpected. Just like with choosing a school, some things are unexpected. You don't know who you're going to meet there. You don't know what you're going to learn there. You don't know what things you're going to discover, what clubs you're going to found at this school or that school. You don't know what's going to happen in your life. And so you can't make a rational decision.
Yeah. But again, I think that it was central for the paper to mention personal transformation, and that's fine. But in the same way, she mentions, what's the Australian marmite?
Vegemite and Marmite.
Yeah, Vegemite, right? So it would be personally transformative for you to taste Vegemite for the first time.
Epistemically transformative.
Epistemically transformative in the same sense that it would be for Mary the color scientist, and in a way where describing everything about the taste couldn't make you come to a conclusion before the same type of value of conclusion than actually tasting the Vegemite. But in the same way, you could just take the stats and see that 75% of people don't like the Vegemite. And the same way, the color red makes X amount of people feel that way. So Mary the color scientist will probably feel that way when she sees the color red. Like, for example, the reason McDonald's uses red because it evokes hunger. Right? That's probably, if it is biological at least, that will probably maintain itself. But again, this is my earlier argument, and we've already passed that And then we've come to the conclusion that even when you look at the stats, it's pretty bleak. And then I said why, and then so we both agree, and you love when I say that the only good thing about this paper is the title, but at least the title is very, very good.
Yeah, it is very good. Yeah, conclusion, I think Chris doesn't agree with the stats, or doesn't think
he
the
has an
stats,
explanation for the stats.
Yeah, doesn't think the stats support the point, and I think it's not that big a deal, the conclusion of this paper, basically.
Okay, so I'm going to edit. I agree with Chris over what he just said. Okay, let's get to the long-awaited peak. I read the last 5 chapters. I'm guessing Alex read the last 4 chapters, minus the last one. So
yeah, that's how you speak.
So it's a 5 to 8. Let's go point by point. So for those who don't remember or haven't caught up with the episodes, Peak essentially argues that, very convincingly, contrarily to L.A. Paul,
Such a hater.
that expertise is made always. It's not born into. It's not born with. And essentially, every example that you give Anders Ericsson of absolute outstanding performance in humans can be traced back to the hours they put in and the way they spent those hours. And the way they have to spend those hours for it to actually result in, significant change in performance is deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is essentially focusing, and second of all, focusing on aspects of your performance very, very specifically that aren't working out. So if we were talking about walking, it would be your foot is angled 15 degrees to the right, whereas it should be on the 0 degree line. And you notice exactly that.
Azimuth.
And you notice exactly that about your walking. And you notice that with time, there is a certain inefficiency in your walking, and you're walking towards the right. Like after 10 minutes, you end up kind of a meter on the right. And that's not good for professional walking if you want to be an expert. So then you go into deliberate practice sessions where you practice the exact specific skill of angling your foot, your right foot, to 0 degrees instead of 15 degrees to the right. And that's, you spend, a maximum of 4 hours a day because it should be exhausting. And then eventually it's kind of internalized and it becomes automatic. But then another problem springs up. And until you become the best walker in the world, you're going to have problems. Well, in fact, there is really no limit to performance. So every time you're just going to keep going and keep going. And the biggest difference between the normal way we approach things, where in the beginning everything is very conscious and inaccurate and uncoordinated, and then after a while, 3 months if you're going at a normal pace, I guess, you automatize a lot of things and you become an average performer, for example, in driving. And then you never get better because you're never working on specific aspects of your performance. But the biggest difference between that and the deliberate practice is automaticity. How much you really relinquish to your subconscious without going in there and tweaking the gears yourself. And not to toot my own horn, but I think that was the best summary I've ever made. So, okay. Point by point, let's go through the last chapters that enforce this point. Chapter 5 is mainly about the Top Gun school and mammograms. So,
and it begins with myths, right, about expertise.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily like those, but I'll name them. Forget about your fixed theories of intelligence or ability. So, again, if you have a fixed theory of intelligence, you're never going to really strive to get better, because anything that in any way confirms a certain level of performance, for example, you start, like, that's the thing too. When I interact with kids more and more these days, I hear things like, but I'm not good at this. I can't do this. Or we're doing origami the other day and they're like, oh, I'm not good at origami. Like, what do you mean? Just fold the papers until you become good at folding papers, man. It really sucks. So
yeah, they are really bad though at origami.
They're pretty bad. Yeah. I showed them one step, and then first of all, it's not aligned with the lines, and then also
like the folds don't go until the end. They just kind of fold until they can say they folded, but it's not fully. And again, if I really cared and they were my children,
I would say, look at every single difference between your paper and mine, and go
Right.
correct that difference one at a time.
All right. I think mostly they just don't care enough. But
It
it's
looks like they care. They want their frog to be good. They want their plane to fly like mine, right?
yeah, that's true. But like let's say you're folding a A4 piece of paper to make a square,
Yeah.
and you have to align the top line with the left one, and like what do they not get about what do they not get about? Look, you did the fold is complete, and you've pressed down on the paper, and I can see it's not aligned. This is not right, and they're just like, here, I did it.
Yeah, it happened to me way too many times. But I wouldn't make theories about what they don't understand. And
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. The thing is, you can just give them feedback directly, and you're like, oh, you almost had it. I have to not see the paper behind. You have to like align it so that it's flush.
yeah,
And then they do it again.
if it were my child, I would do exactly that. And also, I think something that really stuck with me when my 8th grade science teacher said it. Nothing is complicated, but things can be complex, right? So when you break it down into a series of steps, all of those are achievable. And I wish if they were my children, I would take the time to just like, get their attention for 5 seconds, maybe put a, I don't know, Subway Surfers video right next to my face when I say it, and tell them, look, origami is the best parallel for life, right? You think making a frog is hard. All of that means is that for you to get the same frog as I'm making and make it beautiful and make it jumping, you have to go through every single fold just like I do. If there are 20 folds, all you have to do is practice every single fold, and eventually you will get it. It's just one fold at a time. Go life, one fold at a time. You can put that on my gravestone, okay? So yeah, origami is but origami is a really good parallel for life, because all they need to do, they're saying, oh, it's so hard to make a frog, and all that has happened is that they're at fold number 14 and they feel like a lot of it is behind them. They're not seeing the frog shape yet, so they feel like a lot of it is in front of them. But all it was is me saying, make this fold. They make the fold. Make this fold. They make the fold. Like, that's not even the definition of complicated or complex. They just have to make the folds, So it really is sad.
Make life one fold at a time.
Go life one fold at a time.
Go life one fold at a time.
So yeah, I think a lot of children have the fixed theory of intelligence these days. Now you can blame that on
Why do you say these days, man?
standardized testing.
Like,
Okay.
I don't see how.
Because I haven't been in other days. There you go. I haven't been in other days.
Okay, you're making a specific claim about your experience right now.
Yes, my epistemic
Position.
Number 2 myth. Repetition does not lead to improvement if it is not done correctly. Okay, you know what? These myths are good. They're kind of they kind of summarize what's going on, right? This is essentially our entire episode on experience or incompetence. It's a teacher that I really like says a lot. Most people don't have 10 years of experience. They have the same year of experience repeated 10 times. That's the entire point, right? I think my best example with that was, if you've been a mall cop for the last 10 years, what the guy being a bouncer at a club has learned about life and danger and the way that dangerous people look at other people and the way that drunk people act, and the variety of experience of what he has learned is a lot more than you have learned in the last 10 years, right? In the last year.
So you're specifically comparing a mall cop, and a bouncer?
I guess. And again, all it comes down to really is deliberate practice. I'm not saying I guess I'm not making the same point here, because during the episode we didn't have deliberate practice in mind. But again, a mall cop with deliberate practice would probably be a better one in 1 year than one without deliberate practice would be in 10 years. 3, it takes more than effort to improve. Oh, well, I guess I didn't frame it as a myth, but effort
leads to
alone
improvement.
is not
Is the myth.
Yeah, right, exactly. So when something is not working out, for example, you don't break a plateau.
You don't break a plateau.
I guess in the gym would be a good example. Like,
Yeah.
just going into the same weight with the same technique and trying to pull harder. That it's not going to result in you breaking the plateau. You have to specifically see where the form breaks down. So in the walking, one technique that Anders gives, I guess we're familiar now. I'm not calling him Dr. Ericsson, is that you exaggerate one aspect of the performance. So for example, in the gym, it could be the speed with which you're doing the reps, and you would see where the instability appears first, and then you would go into specific drills that correct for that. So all of that to say, the Top Gun school on which the Top Gun movie was based essentially skyrocketed the performance of the U.S. Navy by making them go through drills that were very performance specific. So they mimicked actual combat experiences, and they reviewed their performance with experts. They got instantaneous feedback, and essentially when they were going into battle, I read this a long time ago, but I think the ratios were incredible. Like, instead of losing one plane per every plane that they
shut
knocked down,
Yeah.
it was like 1 to 20.
Something like that. Yeah.
So, yeah, again, obviously, you will get better at combat by practicing combat, not, I don't know, VR experiences programmed by some guy that did
Well,
programming.
That's
all
already
his life.
closer. Okay. Anyway.
It's already closer than, I guess, what they were doing in the 1980s without understanding deliberate practice or VR, right? What they were doing was probably, I don't know, anti-gravity training, cruising, some maneuvers, but not actually getting attacked by other planes. And that's where, when that realistic combat experience came in, is when they realized how much deliberate practice could do for you. And the way this is transferred to mammograms is that actually, we said it 2 episodes ago, but doctors fresh out of medical school are, on objective measures of performance, they're pretty much better than doctors with 20 years of experience, because again, automaticity sets in. The continued medical studies aren't that great in the way they teach because they're focused on knowledge and not skill and performance. So doctors who have experience are usually seen as the ones you would want to refer yourself to for accurate diagnoses, but they're not that good at identifying hard cases of breast cancer, for example. So what Ericsson did was give x-rays of past cases, which is, such an easy thing to think of, right? Like, as a fix, once you have the deliberate practice. And I think that's the beauty of it. Now that we know this, our life is going to significantly change, right? Even you, as a psychologist, unless they find all the clips of you agreeing with me, you're gonna, go out there and, if it is ethically approved, you're gonna go out there and get your sessions independently rated by experts in the field who are performing incredibly well. You will get their feedback, and you're gonna mimic the same conversation where you're gonna ask an editor to cut out everything you said and get what they're saying, and then you're gonna go through the tape and try to say the perfect things that you would now say based on the feedback that the expert gave you, and then re-give it to the expert, and then the expert is going to give you more feedback. All these
It's just so intuitive.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense, and it's very good that the research supports it. Yeah, I think specifically what happened is that he advocated for this practice, and then eventually some hospital actually build a library of past cases that doctors could use to practice their mammograph identification skills.
Exactly. And it makes sense. Like, imagine you just go back home, look at those x-rays, get the instantaneous feedback on the other side of the paper of, okay, did I correctly diagnose breast cancer or not? And then you go through it, and you become better and better at. And this is I had this intuition when I was gaming, unfortunately, again, where when you play first-person shooters, the actual number of times you have to shoot something in a round, so I don't know, in a 2-minute round, right, is maybe I don't know, 3 times if you're lucky if you don't get shot first. Right? You're gonna
Yeah, well,
aim your
yeah.
crosshair at something and then click 3 times in a round. Well, and you're probably gonna miss the first 2 just on average, right? So the amount of practice you're getting, a lot of people were saying, okay, to get better, you have to play. But I understood the following. I told myself, if I go on an aim trainer and actually just practice my aim specifically, and again, Ericsson would say, go even more specific than that. What exactly is your problem with aim? Because when you get down to it, you can have multiple problems. For example, one of my biggest problems was my movement from one point to another was very inefficient because I didn't do a straight line. I flicked fast, overshot or undershot, and then micro adjusted towards the other dot. But what you can do is really slow down and go through specific training to make straight lines between 2 dots, and then you get better at that. So I would even go more specific. But I had this intuition where I was doing, for example, well, at my peak, I was doing 1 hour of aim training where for 1 minute, I literally clicked, I don't know, 120 dots, right? For just 1 minute training bouts of 120 dots. And that gave me the experience in terms of raw aim of...
Wait, is that 2 per second?
Probably. Well, there were big dots, like they had multiple tasks, but if we really add it up, that's in 1 minute, I'm getting the experience of aim of 40 rounds of a game, which is essentially 3 or 4 games, which is around 2 hours. So that's just incredible. And it just should put it in perspective. But I think there's really a parallel between a lot of things in life and aim training and gaming, in the sense that if you understand this method of deliberate practice, you can skyrocket your performance when you really identify what is not working out right now.
You heard it here first. The life is origami and life is a first-person shooter.
Go life, one shot at a time. So
And go life one fold at a time.
Yeah, and one fold. So essentially, the mammogram,
Yeah. Radiologists.
Performance. Yeah, radiologists did have proven, increases in performance. So it all worked out. And
They lived
if
happily
we
ever
were to
after.
include this into anything, it would probably, be medicine. It's pretty significant. And diagnoses. Then, okay, chapter 6. There's a quote. To effectively practice a skill without a teacher, it helps to keep in mind 3 F's. Focus, feedback, fix it. Break the skill down into components that you can do repeatedly and analyze effectively. Determine your weakness and figure out how to address them. Your weaknesses and figure out how to address them. So, okay, I guess it's a continuation of the same point. Here in this chapter, there's the example of Per, the 70-year-old karate beginner who, 70 years old, he wanted to get a black belt in karate. And what Ericsson identified as a problem with him was that he was going to group sessions for karate. And, the teacher might accidentally notice that your technique is off. You might, slack a little bit. So he recommended Per to take individual sessions, and that indeed, made his performance better. He progressed a little bit towards the black belt. I was really hoping that the end of his stories is always a success, but even Dan with a Dan plan, who at 30 years old, I think he left his job and wanted to become a professional golfer. But I mean, Dan is so cool. Dan is so cool because he read about this deliberate practice thing, and he was like, okay, I'm quitting everything. At 30 years old, I'm going to play golf for the first time in my life. And I'm going to do all of it. I'm going to get the coach. I'm going to do deliberate practice every day. I'm going to practice one shot at a time with one, putt, whatever. I don't know anything about golf, and there were some pretty promising results. I think at the time he was writing the book, the end of the Dan plan didn't even happen. So he
It was
didn't become
2015 and we don't know yet. Like, he was still practicing it.
Yeah, he was still practicing. He didn't get there, but a lot of what I've realized is that, from this 10,000 hour rule to becoming an expert and becoming the 1% of the 1%, and what you need to realize is that all of that doesn't even matter. Like, for you to become outstanding or at the very least above average, which is already a source of pride, with deliberate practice in mind, it cannot take more than a year. Like, it just can't. If you're doing hard sessions, bouts of 1 hour of pure concentration with an extremely goal-specific practice session in mind, 4 hours a day, you're going to bed exhausted, you're taking midday naps because it's so mentally exhausting, you're analyzing every aspect of your experience, you're working with professionals, you're getting instantaneous feedback and fixing every one of your problems. You can't
that is
become
pretty
outstanding,
cool.
right?
That is pretty cool to like think about.
Yeah, you're not going to be Mozart, right? But again, we're going to get to him. You're still, I mean, even if you're thinking about your income, right? You're still going to be very hireable because what you will have done with yourself,
Depending on the skill you develop, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you're doing everything I said with a violin, you're gonna be nowhere. You're gonna be in the 30th percentile. Because
yeah, if you start with a violin at 25 or at like 30, yeah,
you're gonna be in the 40th percentile. So, okay. Anything more about chapter 6? Do you want to take over for chapter 7 or no?
I mean, there were other things in chapter 6, but I feel like it was pretty. So the first point was talking about the Dan plan. Which, as Chris said, a guy in his 30s wanting to become a professional and doing all the steps, but the point was about plateaus. When you've surpassed like an initial teacher, or not even when you've surpassed, I guess, when the teacher has taught you everything they had to teach, change teachers because you're at another point, and that may cause a plateau. Point 2 was focus is very important. So, if needed, and especially at the beginning, do shorter sessions, but be intense in your practice and focus, as Chris said in point 3. Focus, feedback, fix it. But you need that mental energy. You need to be really there. You can't do it halfway, and otherwise it won't work. Yeah. Point 4 was about plateaus. Push yourself in different ways, as Chris said. Identify problems when you push yourself in that way, and then try to fix those specific problems. Because often what he says is that a plateau is not about, it is about like one specific skill in everything that's involved in the practice. And then point 5 was about motivation, and he says that it's a lot about, well, there's a lot of things to say about this, but one of the points is that it's good to create a habit, because sometimes you're not going to want to do the things. So he was saying a lot of the violin players that in a previous study he mentioned that were excellent often started the day with that practice, because it's easy. You won't skip it. You wake up, you do the practice, and then you go on with your day, and no matter how motivated you feel or not, you're going to do it. So create a habit.
Yeah, and motivation is a big point. I don't want to dwell on it because I'm sure, we've talked about it with Succeed a little bit, but the biggest thing is to be careful with, especially if anyone wants to apply this with children and make them experts. Any psychopaths want to make the next Tiger Woods like me, then I would say the biggest thing is to not shift their intrinsic motivation that they already have to extrinsic motivation. So in class, I saw this comparison between the Finnish school system and the American school system. And the largest difference is that essentially in the Finnish school system, they don't start evaluating or giving grades before like grade 5 or something.
Okay.
Then they make everything collaborative, right? So it's not competition. And you know how, I don't know, I guess in Asian schools or Eastern European, you would see like the best student gets his name called out first and his exam is given back first. And then the last student, his grade is in front of everyone in the class. All of that becomes extrinsic motivation to impress someone, or for rewards, or for grades, or for whatever. So these systems are stripping children of their intrinsic motivation. But if you actually take a child of like school age in their everyday life, they're I mean, they're asking questions left and right. They're curious about this, they're curious about that. And as soon as you make it about evaluation and being the best in the class and impressing your parents and whatever, you strip them of this intrinsic motivation that they have built in for them to learn, like this adaptive, magical ability that, makes them, like one of the children I work with, like repeats after the TV. He watches Disney movies and he repeats quotes that are being said, like, because it's so interesting to him. So you strip them of that, and it all becomes about something extrinsic, and then extinguishes, and that is extinguished fast. So biggest thing is to counterintuitively, in a way, not make it about rewards. You can't make it about like, oh, make mommy and daddy proud. Like, it's just not going to work in the long term. You're going to make them suffer. If it is intrinsic motivation, they're going to keep going by themselves. And this habit making is part of that, because it'll just be subconscious. And that's a lot of it is about making it subconscious. Like, if I ask you, okay, why are you practicing your guitar 1 hour and 30 minutes a day? And your answer is, because I heard guys who play guitars get more girls, right? Like, I already know you're going to fail because that's the reason. But if you ask someone who's really passionate and who's just like got his guitar and he every single day he practices, and you ask him, he's probably going to say, I like it. Like, I'm doing it. I love it. It makes me feel good. Like, this is all that it's about. And Anders Ericsson is a lot against saying that people have an innate gift. But if we were to name an innate gift people have, it's this intrinsic motivation, right? I think that's a big conclusion of the book. It's, how are these kids under 8 years old taking a violin and probably pouring more focus and effortful work into their practice than 80% of adults are, genuinely? How is it possible?
Yeah. He does say this explicitly in the book. If we were to talk about genetic gift, it would be the genetic gift of sustained attention, something like that,
Right,
and like ability to tolerate things you don't want to do.
Yeah, there's that, but it's step one, which we're going to see in chapter 7, I think, or 8. Step one of kind of getting obsessed is starting with play and a genuine interest, right? So, for example, the example of the 3 sisters that are incredible at the piano, I think.
Chess,
sorry. It all started with an interest in the shape of the chess pieces, right? Oh, look at the horsey, right? And that's where it has to start. And as soon as you make it about, oh, you have to make our family proud, it's lost. Yeah, so the Polgar's sisters. 3 sisters, really good at chess. I'm not really interested in this case. I guess this part of the book is more about how you can make an expert and how to convey this onto children. But step 1 would be, it begins with play, right? The activity must be fun and interesting. So the shape of the chess pieces was that for the Polgars. Number 2, you take lessons from a coach or teacher. You start engaging in deliberate practice. And gradually it starts to become a habit more and more. And I think the support, just in terms of the motivation, has to shift in this step more and more towards the child than the parent. Right? I think that's where, in the sense that
the support, you're saying?
The support, in the sense that, like, it has to be less and less you saying, like, okay, let's get up for practice.
Right.
And it has to be more the child being like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready. And this is where the shift, like, this is where you can lose the intrinsic motivation. Because if they shift from, oh, these piano
tiles, keys
right, are so fun to press, they make sounds, and you instantly go into, okay, I'm paying for a teacher, and when you come home, you have to show what you learned, because if you didn't learn what you should have, we're not going to be proud of you, and you're going to get spanked. But otherwise, you're going to get a candy. Like, okay, that guy's never going to get good at piano. Step 3 is commitment. So
that day is not going to get good at piano.
Step 3 is commitment. So no matter the sacrifice, if the best coach in town or in the country is on the other side of the country, the whole family is going to move, because that's a sacrifice that has to be made. So there's an estimate that for a child who's an aspiring expert tennis player, It would cost around $30,000 a year for the tournaments here and there, the equipment, the coaches, and that's the level of investment that it takes. So at this point, the support from the parents should only be logistical, right? You should drive them to the practice, but it shouldn't be like get up for practice, because if the child doesn't want to, it's just not going to go through. And step 4 is the pathfinders. So it's the people who discover new things in their fields. And Ericsson says, well, you might think, it's a light bulb moment, right? We all see it as a light bulb moment that happens overnight, like Einstein dreaming up the periodic table. Was that him? No, some Russian guy.
Mendeleev.
Yeah, Mendeleev. Dreaming up the periodic table. But what actually probably happened is that the guy obsessed over chemical compounds and tried to organize them in a logical way for years and years. And then one day he woke up and the mental picture was kind of painted for him, and his mental representation was literally the periodic table of elements.
Mm-hmm.
He probably forged that through hours and hours of experience.
Right. It's not like a light bulb moment, as you said. Creativity in a field is more like we perceive it as creativity, but it's you getting up to the edge of human knowledge and human ability and just pushing it a bit and pushing it a bit and pushing it a bit. And it's amazing for people, but it's all like in steps for those geniuses. It's not just like genii.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, you might, like at our level, we're thinking it's a mysterious creativity, inborn kind of ability thing. But what actually happens is they do these deliberate practice principles. They get to the edge of human ability, and then guess what they do? They just continue the exact same thing. They look at their experience, their performance, they push themselves to the edge, and they're like, okay, what breaks down first? This? Okay, let me go do that. 4 hours a day of focused work. They keep the same principles, get feedback, review their own performance, feedback, fix it, and they push humanity itself past its limits because they're already operating on the edge, and they apply the same principles they applied to get there, to get further. It's just like a ladder, as Ericsson says, a ladder that you keep putting the steps in yourself and then climbing them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're building it along the way. So that's how it always is. The creative, the relentless, and the driven are not content with the status quo, and they look for ways to move forward, to do things that others have not. That's the quote by Ericsson. Anything more to say about this one?
No.
Okay. Chapter 8. We're probably going to stop there. So it's just a lot of examples. Do you have a list of the examples you would like to talk about?
Yeah. The point of the chapter, it is about innate talent. I think the name of the chapter
main objection, right?
Yeah, the main objection. What do you mean? Okay, yeah. Well,
to Ericsson's theory.
Right.
I have a quote where just it can preface the whole thing. You don't even have need to summarize it, and then we can go to the examples that interest you. So, whenever I write or speak about deliberate practice and expertise, I am invariably asked, but what about natural talent? In my articles, my talks, I always offer the same basic message that I have here. Expert performers develop their extraordinary abilities through years and years of dedicated practice, improving step by step in a long, laborious process. There are no shortcuts. Various sorts of practice can be effective, but most effective of all is deliberate practice. Deliberate practice takes advantage of the natural adaptability of the human brain and body to create new abilities. Most of these abilities are created with the help of detailed mental representations, which allow us to analyze and respond to situations much more effectively than we could otherwise.
Yeah. The one example he gives is Mozart, and he's seen as this genius. Well, he's seen as a genius, he should, but prodigy that had this innate talent. But the point of the chapter is when you look deeper, or at least when Anders Ericsson looked deeper, he always finds deliberate practice. The usual suspect is behind it all, right? So Mozart had a big sister. Well, first of all, his dad was a musician himself, and he started training his children very young. And his sister already played, and
his dad learned from his mistakes in training the sister.
Right. So
already
he was probably,
it was closer to deliberate practice already.
and I can imagine, his sister was closer to him in age, so she could help him through the stages that she went through, and so he was at a bigger advantage. But it's all practice, and
I think he started around 5, by the way.
yeah. And one point about Mozart is, I don't remember exactly what he wrote and at what age, but there's some like crazy claim that like, oh, he wrote his first pieces when he was 8 and they were like amazing.
Yeah.
But then you check the facts, and then you see that his dad probably helped him, and it was like some other performance piece of art that he transcribed and sort of modified, and it's really not that mysterious and innate geniusy. It's really just practice, and he started somewhere and he progressed, and yes, he did get further than anyone, but through steps again.
Yeah, so again, one of the impressive thing about Mozart was that, I don't know, either it's sonata or whatever, like
A play or a sonata, or
yeah, he composed original content by the time he was like 8, and some amazing original content by the time he was 12. And essentially both of those can be traced back by music historians to a compilation of pieces played by less popular composers. So the standing theory here is that his dad got all of those pieces together and, compiled them himself, fed it to Mozart. Obviously, Mozart could play by that time, because by the time he was 12, he had, 7 years of deliberate practice, in addition to his brain being malleable in that time. So his hand coordination essentially developed with him playing piano. So like his hands were made for the piano. Then his magical ability to hear a musical piece by reading the notes is not magical at all. It's just mental representation, and I don't know, learning how to hear was parallel with him playing the piano. So again, all of this was developed, and yeah, by the time he was 12, he composed this and this, and his actual first piece of original content that can probably, like, the theory is, can be confirmed to be his, was by the time he was 15, and by that time he had 10 years of deliberate practice, which is essentially his 10,000 hours, I think. I haven't made the calculations, but obviously if that's what he was known for, he was performing there and there in the country because he was a young prodigy, and by that time his entire life was dedicated towards that. So again, nothing magical. He was kind of forged. Other examples are Mario Lemieux, who's known to be one of the best hockey players of all time. And essentially, all I need to say is that his family was crazy about hockey, and so crazy, in fact, that his entire first floor in the winter had an open back door, and his parents poured water into his house to make the entire kitchen and first floor a skating ring. So they were skating inside the house. So go figure how he became the best. Any other example that caught your eye? I think Paganini was good. Like, it's a fun thing to end on.
Is that the jumper?
No, the violin player.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So essentially, he's known for this intricate story of him playing and gradually just losing strings on his violin because he was so passionate. And one string breaks, he keeps playing his symphony. Another string breaks, keeps playing, and at the end he's at one string, and he finishes his piece without even budging, and everyone's amazed how he was so good at the violin. He essentially played on one string and finished his piece.
Like improvised, right?
Yeah, and improvised, right? But when you dig deeper, and again, I gotta know, if anything, if I want to deliberate practice anything, it's how Ericsson does his research. Because imagine just getting to the bottom of stuff. Like, the guy gets to the bottom of stuff. That's impressive.
I guess it's cherry picked examples also. I'm sure he did a lot more research where he didn't find things.
Fair enough, right? If you're looking at Mozart, there are probably like 100 historians that are at the top of their field that dug up these things about him. But so Paganini was an amazing violin player. Again, probably got there in the same way as Mozart did. So started young, and he was also a performer. So he had performance in mind. He had, well, in the sense that he was a showmanship in mind. The story is, I think, a lady asked him to compose a piece on 2 strings of the 4 strings of the violin.
I think he thought it would be an interesting idea to be like, oh, this one string represents one of the lovers and then the other represents the other, and it would be really cool to do that. So he started practicing playing with only 2 strings.
Exactly. So he played a thing with 2 strings where in the story of his piece, there one lover was 1 string and the other was the other. And then he got this idea that he could gradually reduce the number of strings necessary for his piece to be played, but just because of his showmanship mentality, he could also break each of the strings that he didn't need gradually throughout the piece. And obviously everyone would gasp and be like, oh my god, the concert is over, his strings are broken. But in fact, he finishes it with 1, and everyone thinks this is all improvised and it's all, an amazing event only they have, witnessed. And he's so good that even a piece that necessitates 4 strings could be finished on 1 because he's so good. But it was actually all planned, and it was a prank, and the cameras are there, and there.
Yeah, I think the point is just like, there's no magic. He wrote the piece.
Exactly.
It's really cool that he did that and that he can play something viable with 1 string, but he wrote it. Like, it's all progress.
Yeah, all part of the plan I just made up. So the opposite of that. So look, there's a lot more, honestly, but I don't know. I think we did.
I'm ready to go out and deliberate practice right now.
Exactly. So the reason we're ending the episode is not because we don't have anything else to say about the book, but because we're so adamant about deliberate practicing.
You're adamant and I'm eager, and everything is so good.
And together we are
Adam and Eager.
No way. No way. So contrarily to Paganini's 1-string piece, this was not planned. So that's amazing. Okay, well, thanks a lot for listening. What's our
closing segment?
Thinkin Bros closing segment rating.
Okay. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 9.
1, 9.
We're so good. Okay. Yeah, we figured it out. Indeed. So thank you. Go to thinkinbros.com for more information. Contact us at thinkinbros@gmail.com for even more information, realistically. And I was Chris this week.
Alex, thank you.